Good evening, good evening, good evening. This is R.C. Blakes, and I am so excited to be able to have this little discussion with you tonight. I know it's Christmas Eve, so I hope that somebody's there to receive me and to at least hear what we have to talk about tonight. If you can, share this and I don't know, somehow make people know that I'm on here tonight. I've been a little lazy lately, and that's due to just kind of an extreme um, work schedule, I suppose, that has prevented me from being as present as I'd like to be. But I have an issue that I want to discuss tonight, and I'm going to try to discuss as much of this as I can. I recently released my first online program, Transcending the Father Wound, and so in conjunction with that, I want to do some um, sessions here on YouTube centered around the subject for those that may not be able to afford the course, or for whatever reason. I want to make certain that the message is consistent, and that people get it, because the more I delve into this issue relative to fathers, and the reason I have to, as I put it, dive into it relative to father wounds, is because I've never had one. That is, I've never had a father wound. I had a tremendous father. I had a great father who really nurtured me and poured life into me like fathers are supposed to do. And so I guess I grew up spoiled, not realizing, but every child should grow up spoiled if that's the case. I grew up spoiled in comparison to most of those in my world, at least, who did not have fathers who were present, or if they were present, they were not supportive, they were not loving or kind. They may have been financially supportive. But one thing I learned as I grew older, and as I began to have more adult conversations with my father was a man that grew up without his father or his mother. Yeah, my father, who was a great father, himself grew up without father or mother. And yet he became such a tremendous father to me and my brother. And so, as I got older and we began to have adult conversations, he began to explain, sometimes directly and even indirectly, some of his pain that he suffered as a consequence of not really having not having a relationship with his father, no semblance of a relationship with his father. And so the question came about one day, how is it that you became such a great father and yet you didn't have one? And his response was to me that I simply gave you guys what I always wish I had. And so I'm bringing my father's, who's now deceased and in heaven today, I'm bringing his history into this discussion, because it says to anyone who's dealing with a father wound, you can transcend that. And my father came to become a man that really, in some sense, rewrote history in so many ways. Here in the city of New Orleans, a man without a father or mother, because he was conceived in a fashion that was not socially acceptable. And so my grandmother had to leave him with her parents, his grandparents, and so he grew up without father or mother. But yet this guy, who didn't have father or mother, so he had a father wound and a mother wound, they pulled him out of school in Mississippi at that time, I think in the 6th grade, so that he could go to work to help provide for the needs of the family, the financial needs of the family. So he lacked education. He had to continue his education as an adult. But yet this guy, without father or mother, grew into such a man that is revered around the world. in the city of New Orleans, it was not 3 years after his death, they renamed one of the major streets in the city of New Orleans after him. In fact, about it, if you ever visit our church in New Orleans, our main campus, it's on Robert C. Blake Senior Drive, named after my late father. So I'm saying that to say it does not matter. It does not matter that you have not had or do not have a father present in your life. You can transcend that, and you can transcend it, and you may rise to any height you desire to rise to. It all depends. If your consciousness is at a place where you make up your mind that it doesn't matter what I've been dealt or not dealt, going to get to a place that is called destiny for my life. Now, tonight I want to look at relative to the father wound. And I guess there's 1, 2, 3, 4 issues I want to look at relative to what daddy issues. Some might call daddy issues. And number one is, well, let me read what Justin Hunt says. Justin Hunt says the father wound is so deep and so all-pervasive in so many parts of the world that its healing could well be the most radical social reform conceivable. If we can bring healing to the father wound in the lives of those in society, he says that it could be the most radical social reform conceivable. Quite honestly, if we heal the father wound, we probably eradicate recidivism in the jailhouse. If we heal the father wound, we elevate the self-esteem of a broken generation of young queens who don't know who they are and are settling for less than they deserve. So this subject matter is something that is the biggest problem. It is the biggest problem in most of those that we encounter on a daily basis. Number one, dealing with this father wound and what we call daddy issues. When you lack the presence of a strong, loving, affirming father, there is a lost sense of security. Fathers provide security. Fathers provide security, and when there is an absence of your father, there's a lost sense of security. Now, there's this text that I want to read for you tonight, but it's kind of long, and I'm wondering if you all are going to tolerate my reading of it. My wife is constantly calling, which means she's not aware that I'm on here, and she's kind of interfering with my signal. But let's look at 2 Samuel 13. I want to show you something, because one of King David's one of his downfalls that you discover, one of his downfalls of many, is that he did not protect his one, at least one of his daughters. He failed to provide security for one of his daughters. And when a father is absent, and I guess King David in this sense represents a father that is physically and financially present, but is emotionally disconnected. And he fails to provide the kind of security for one of his daughters. Let me read it for you. Hopefully you all won't leave me. 2 Samuel 13, verses 6 through 23. Whew, listen to what it says. This is going to be a long one. So Ammon lay down and made himself sick. This is one of David's sons. This is a very long story. So we're taking it up in the middle of the story. Ammon is one of David's sons who has this this perverted desire for one of his sisters. And so the Bible says, so he lay down, made himself sick, and when the king was come to see him, Amnon said unto the king, I pray thee, let Tamar, my sister, come and make me a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat and at her hand. Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, Go now to thy brother Amnon's house and dress him meat, or make something for him to eat. So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was laid down. And she took flour and kneaded it and made cakes in his sight, and did bake the cakes. And she took a pan and poured them out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, Have out all men from me. And they went out, every man from him. So he told all the men, Get out of here. They went out from him. And Amnon said unto Tamar, Bring the meat into the chamber, that I may eat of thine hand. And Tamar took the cakes which she had made, and brought them into the chamber of Amnon, her brother. And when she had brought them unto him to eat, he took hold of her and said unto her, Come lie with me, my sister. And she answered him, No, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Do not thou this folly. Don't rape me, her own brother. And whither shall I cause my shame to go? If you do this, how am I going to get rid of the shame? And as for thee, thou shalt be as one of the fools in Israel. Now therefore, I pray thee, speak unto the king, for he will not withhold me from thee. Howbeit, he would not hearken unto her voice, but being stronger than she, forced her. So he raped her and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her exceedingly. He raped her, then he hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred wherewith he hated her was greater than the love wherewith he had loved her. He really didn't hate her, he was hating himself. She represented his self-hatred. And Amnon said unto her, Arise, be gone. And she said unto him, There is no cause. This evil in sending me away is greater than the other that thou didst unto me. But he would not hearken unto her. Then he called his servant that ministered unto him, and said, Put now this woman out from me. And bolt the door after her. And she had a garment of divers colors upon her, for with such robes were the king's daughters that were virgins apparelled. So she was a virgin when he raped her. Then his servant brought her out and bolted the door after her. And Tamar put ashes on her head, and tore her garment of divers colors that was on her, and laid her hand on her head, and went on crying. And Absalom, this is her other brother, her brother said unto her, Hath Amnon thy brother been with thee? But hold now thy peace, my sister, he is thy brother. Regard not this thing. So Tamar remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house. But when King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. And Absalom spake unto his brother Amnon, neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon, because he had forced his sister Tamar. And it came to pass, after 2 full years, that Absalom had sheep shearers in Baalzar, which is beside Ephraim. And Absalom invited the king's sons. Tamar was distressed. Okay, he invited the king's sons, and when you read the full context, you'll discover that Absalom killed his brother because he was angry about what he had done to their sister. But here's the point. Tamar was distressed for a few reasons. Number one, clearly she was distressed because of what her brother had done to her. But her father put her in harm's way through carelessness. Her father did not avenge her abuse. And as a consequence, her brother waited 2 years to avenge his sister. So the brother had more paternal instinct than David. Now, if David had properly dealt with his son relative to this transgression, his other son probably would not have killed his own brother. But David failed to provide security for his own daughter. And how many daughters are left in a position where the world abuses and fathers kind of sit in silence with no response? And what it does is it creates a what? Father wound. When a woman When a woman's sense of security has been transgressed by the carelessness of a father, she grows up in life without the capacity, or at least some limited capacity, to trust. This is the woman that grows up in life and she does not even know how to trust a good man. She does not know how to respond to authentic and genuine love, because her heart, that part of her heart, has been crushed by the absence of her father. So there's a lost sense of security. And with this woman, and even young men, you see within their eyes a constant, a perpetual sense of anxiety. It's like they're constantly stressed out. It's like everything's well, but they're looking like, when is it going to go bad? When is it going to go bad? And you quite often become pessimistic about good things. It's like, okay, this is cool, but how long is it going to last? When that sense of security has been snatched from you, that fathers should provide, it creates a spirit of dysfunction. The second thing is that the father wound creates a lost sense of identity. There's a lost sense of identity. In other words, you don't really know who you are. It's like when your father's absent, when your father's not present, the foundation of your identity has shifted and moved away. And so now you spend your life accomplishing and achieving, because quite honestly, many people who are struggling with the father wound are high achievers. They're high achievers, but many times they're high achievers, but they're miserable in their accomplishments. And the reason they're miserable in their accomplishments is because they accomplish the things that they do trying to fabricate an identity. So because they have not received what should have been theirs, I guess innately, for lack of another term, what should have been their birthright, which is a sense of identity from the man that fathered me or seeded me, they buy into the world's idea of identity being attached to what one does, what one accomplishes, what one has. So they make certain that they do something that is honorable. They make certain that they have a whole lot of things that are valuable. And they make certain that they attain to some level of status in life that is admirable. But at the core, they're still empty and they're void of identity, because that is something that your father gives you. Everything that I am, my father poured it into me through his words, through his example, through his affirmations, through his endorsement. And when a person, male or female, does not have that, you struggle to know who you really are. You struggle to know who you are. Listen to what the text says in Lamentations. I know most of us don't read in Lamentations, but if you look in Lamentations chapter 5, verses 1 through 3, he says, "Remember, O Lord, what is come upon us. Consider and behold our reproach." Listen to verse 2. He says, "Our inheritance is turned to strangers, our houses to aliens. We are orphans and fatherless." The foundation of who we are, the foundation of who I am, has shifted because we are a fatherless generation. He says we are orphans and fatherless. When the father's absence, the sense of inheritance, the sense of belonging, the sense of place, he says our inheritance is turned to strangers, our houses to aliens, because of fatherlessness. Now, this is also indirectly, I think it's a lesson to all of us males that, how important it is to actually fulfill the ministry of the father. It's cool to participate in the procreation of an individual. But it's another matter altogether to actually step up to the plate and to actually be a father to the children you actually seed. It takes more than, sex to be a father. It takes more than even just paying bills to be a father. You may be a great provider, but being a provider and being a father are two different things. Being a father is providing that security, and being a father is giving your child or your children a unique sense of identity. Giving your child and your children or your children a unique sense of identity of who they are. Fathers prophesy over the lives of their children. Everything that I'm doing now, my father prophesied it. My father said, you will do this and you will be that. And you are this and you cannot do that. And you are better than this and you should not sink to that. And my life aligned itself with the words of my father. Fathers have more power than we realize. The impact of a father's words are prophetic in the lives of his children. Well, if the mother stops you from your child, see, that's a whole different lesson altogether. Because as I talk about even in the online program, Transcending the Father Wound, sometimes children grow up with the idea that daddy wasn't there and daddy didn't care and daddy was a bum. And sometimes the reality behind that scenario is that there was a mother who prevented a father from actually playing his role. That's a reality. That's a reality. So I say to people who have the father wound to really search the history. If you have your mother and your father both living, sit down and have some adult conversations and begin to discern the history of their relationship, because some things in a lot of cases that you feel like your father missed it in were not even his own fault. It was the consequence of his hands being tied by the forces that might be. Sometimes that's your mother. How many times have I seen grown people discover that their fathers were not participant in their upbringing and it had nothing to do with the men once they got mature enough or old enough to have the adult conversation? That's I'm glad you raised that. But there's a lost sense of identity when we don't have our fathers, when our fathers are absent. And when you've not had a father, you're searching for identity. And this is why you make 6 figures and you spend it all. There's no reason in the world a person should make over $100,000 and not have some money. If you're making over $100,000, even if you're making anything close to it, all it takes is just a balanced mindset to be able to live your life comfortably and to be able to put money aside for rainy days for your future. But how many people do you know who make $100,000, $200,000, and every year they're broke? They have a lot of expensive things, but they have no money, no resources. It's because they are searching for it. They're trying to buy an identity. This is why, as a queen of a woman, you lay down and you give your body to a clown of a man. It's because you don't really know who you are. And so now you're searching for identity through relationships and through sex. Because you lack identity from within. You're searching for it on the outside when it was supposed to be generated from the inside. This is the consequence of a father wound. This is what we are perpetuating, gentlemen, when we fail to father our children. And I say 75% of being a good father there's no such thing as a perfect father, but 75% of being a good father is being present and attentive. Being present and attentive. Being a man that is going to be present and a man that's going to pay attention and listen and respond. That's 75% of it right there. Being present, being attentive, and responding. Responsibility, having the ability to respond Doesn't mean that you're going to always have the answers, but your children should have memories of your being present, being attentive, and responding as best you could. It should never be your children's testimony that you just weren't there, or you were there, but you weren't paying attention. You didn't care. That should never be, because their sense of identity, their sense of security is linked to. Okay, number 3. I only have 4. When there's a father wound, not only is there the lost sense of security and the lost sense of identity, but there's also a strong need in the life of a woman to be affirmed by a man. I find that to be the case more times than not. That when a woman has not had a healthy relationship with her father, there's a strong need in her to be affirmed by a man. That's why she makes relationships her priority as she comes into adulthood, even into the teenage years. She begins to make a relationship with a man her priority, because she's suffering from what I call the approval trap, because her father, who was the first man, primary man in her life, because her father rejected her, or so she thinks he rejected her. Now in her subconscious mind, she feels as though she needs a man to accept her, to heal the pain of the father's rejection of her. Making sense? And so now she finds herself in one relationship after another after another. She never intended on having all of these relationships. Is that she was striving to attain something that her father should have left with her. That was a sense of security and identity, as well as the father establishes her self-esteem. So since her father left her self-esteem on empty, she's striving to fill that self-esteem with another man. A man that, in most cases, has a perverted concept of why she's even present. All he can see in her is the sex. And because she needs his approval so desperately, she even breaks her own moral code many times. She goes against her values and her principles. She throws the Bible and every other thing she believes to be the right way to be and to live out of the window, so that she can do whatever it takes to please this man, so that this man can affirm her, so that he can affirm her. And here's the reality. You have a generation of predators that understand the psychology behind the father wound and can pick up on, they may not even be able to read, but they're slick enough to pick up on the fact that her daddy wasn't there. She has daddy issues and she needs to be affirmed. And they know how to play on that, give you just enough to string you out, to have you grasping and grasping and grasping and grasping for something that you never really attained to keep you on a leash. Because she has a strong need to be affirmed by a man. When a man has a father wound, he has a strong need to be admired. The woman needs to be affirmed. The man needs to be admired. So he'll spend all his money on expensive toys. He'll go to the strip club and he'll throw all his money on the stage, and the woman will tell him, oh, he's sweet daddy and he the finest thing in here and all of that. And he'll go every Friday and throw all his money on the stage because he has a strong need to be admired. He has a strong need to be in control. He has a strong need to be the man. So now you have, and this is something I bring out in the course, you have the conflict between two dysfunctions. You have a man that needs to, be in control and be admired. You have a woman that needs to be affirmed. She brings her needs. She needs to be affirmed. He needs to be in control. He needs to be admired. He needs to be in control because, you know, I'm the man, and the way my father let me down, I'm never going to depend on another man again in my life. I need to be in control. So now you bring that dysfunctional man to this dysfunctional woman. She has a strong need to be affirmed and will go to limits that are unbelievable to attain to that. He knows how to act and to pretend to give her what she wants. And so now you just have a tornado of confusion where one dysfunction feeds the other. And now you create this codependent relationship where the two just kind of simultaneously destroy one another. Okay. Number 4, and I'm done. When there's a father wound, there is left a deep-seated anger. When your father's not been present in your life, you may not even realize it. There's an anger that begins to rest in your bosom. There's an anger. And see, when we think about anger, we think, oh, that's not always the case. Sometimes anger looks like this. Sometimes anger seems to be docile, but it's passive aggressive. It's as angry, it's as vehement as any other, boisterous type anger, but it's undercover. And when you have lacked a father and you realize how much you have really been deprived of in life because this guy wasn't there, if you're not conscious, if you're not aware, it can transition from the pain of rejection to resentment, to bitterness, to anger, to hate, which then begins to what? Self-destruct you. Self-destruct you. It doesn't matter if your father was there or not, or why he was there or wasn't there. At some point, you gotta understand that out of your heart proceed the issues of your life. So whatever you allow to be resident in your heart is going to produce fruit in your life. If you allow anger and bitterness because your father wasn't there, and you're mad with your father, and now you're having children, well, that stuff is going to show up in your seed. You certainly can't be an angry mother full of hate and carry children in your womb and don't think that is not going to have some kind of an impact on them spiritually and emotionally. Everybody's so, nobody understands the aggression of the young urban black man. Nobody gets why is the young urban black man so angry? Well, just look at the history. He comes out of the bowels of abuse, rejection, deprivation, from slavery to Jim Crow to struggle for civil rights to institutional racism today, to the, just the intentional destruction of the family structure, pulling his father out of the house, locking him up in jails, locking the black man up in jails, and, creating social structures that rob him of opportunities. And then you say, well, why is he so angry? Well, that stuff is in him. And it was in his father, it was in his grandfather, it was in his mother. His mother had to raise him in all of this anger and all of this stuff. When there's a father wound, there's a deep-seated anger. There's a deep-seated anger. Look what the Bible says in Colossians 3:21. Fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. How many children are discouraged because their fathers have provoked them to anger? But the thing you have to understand is that your father, in his ignorance or his absence, may have provoked the anger, but you have the power to receive it or to reject it. You have the power to receive it or to reject it. Now watch this. Though, and I will never speak as though I understand what you're feeling. My wife can relate to it. My wife had a tremendous father wound. I'll never speak as though I understand what you're feeling. You know, I get it because I've been around it, but I can't tell you I understand it because I had a great father. But I will say this: if you are angry, you need to begin the process of moving away from that, because anger does nothing positive for you. All anger does is it takes a person that impacted your past, and anger transports that person into your present and possibly into your future, so that they can even create even greater damage. That's all anger does. So that's why I've made a choice, you know, that and people do things and all kind of stuff. You would be amazed at the things that people do to offend and to hurt me. Any person that is in any position of authority has to go through a lot. And so I made a decision a long time ago that I'm just not going to become offended, and I'm not going to hold, I'm not going to be bitter and angry. I'm not going to be malicious. I'm not going to harbor hatred in my heart for people. I'm just going to release stuff and let stuff go. And because it works for me. I cannot have a cluttered soul and a healthy life. I cannot have a cluttered soul and a healthy life. And so, yeah, you may have injured me greatly. You may have done something horrific to me, you know, as my father. But now it's my choice to allow that stuff to hamper and to hinder my future or not. Because one of the marks of a father wound is a deep-seated anger. And listen to what the Bible says in Hebrews 12:15. He says, looking diligently lest any man fail of the grace of God, or miss the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and watch this, and thereby many be defiled. He says, if you allow a root of bitterness to live in you, it'll spring up at the most inopportune time. It will trouble you, and it will ultimately defile you. So these are just some of my thoughts relative to this subject matter. And I saw something about prayer, and I am going to pray. Of course, behind a subject like this, I'm certainly going to pray. Because in my humble opinion, there are some things that we can do on our own by our own power, but then there are other things that really require the power of God to come into our lives to help us to process and to help us to transcend or to overcome. And the father wound is certainly one of those things. Soul ties is another. That we need the power of God to help us to overcome and to override. So I'm going to pray, and if you would, just give me a second. Father, I thank you for this time. I thank you for this message. I thank you for putting it on my heart and giving me the passion to teach it, to raise the issue, to address the issue. And now, Father, I pray for those that are actually dealing with this, those that are actually struggling with this and don't know how to process this, God. Some of them are already there. They're angry. They lack that sense of identity. They're paranoid. They lack that sense of security. And God, they don't know what to do with their lives. I ask you now by the power of the Holy Spirit to move into the space wherever they are. Move into the space wherever they are. And to give them a sense of rest. Give them a sense of peace, even on this Christmas Eve night. Give them a sense of peace, God, with all that they have lacked, with all that they've been deprived of. God, I thank you that you are always our provider. And when natural fathers are absent, God, you are always a very present help. You are the ultimate father, Absentee fathers should have been a resource for us. But God, you are the source. And so now, Father, I ask you to breathe upon them and give them joy even in this season. Eliminate the confusion and give them rest for their souls. It is in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, listen, I just wanted to address that on this Christmas Eve night. The online program, Transcending the Father Wound, is available at my website, rcblakes.com. You can go there and get it. It's 5 sessions and there are 3 components to each session. Hey, Christina, glad to see you in tonight. There are 3 components to each session. There's the part where I'm teaching. There's the part where we bring in the licensed counselor, Robin. And there's the part where Lisa and I have the conversation about her experiences with the father wound. So there are 3 components, 5 sessions. So they're like 15 videos of just content. And it's available now at my website, rcblakes.com. You'll have lifetime access to it. And in fact about it, Christina's the one that put it together for me in terms of producing it. And she put in there where you can download the MP3s. So if you want to put it on your phone, you can put it on your phone and listen as you go. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I love you. I thank God for you. I want you to have a very, very, very Merry Christmas. I didn't know if anybody would get on tonight on Christmas Eve, but thank you all for hanging out with me on Christmas Eve. What a joy it is for me. I love you. I thank God for you. If I don't talk to you before the new year, I want you to get ready to have a tremendous 2019. I paused for a reason because I wanted to sink in. I want you to get ready to have a tremendous 2019. Things are going to shift. Things are going to change and move to the next level. You know how I can prophesy that? Because I know that we are going to do something different in 2019. I can prophesy that 2019 is going to be a greater year for me and for you because we are going to do something different. I'm going to coach you all the way through 2019 right here on YouTube. I'm going to give you what is necessary to get you up off of that couch and to get you to living your dreams. This is your time. This is your year. No more self-pity. No more procrastination. 2019 is going to be your year. I prophesy that over your lives now. I love you. And there's the direct link Christina has put up for us. I love you. I thank God for you. In fact, about it, I'll try to put that in the description for those of you that may want to get to it. I love you. Thank God for you. Pray for me. Pray for me. And I look forward to just a great year, 2019. God bless you. I'll talk to you real soon.